going to have to do it. Hello and welcome back to the One Piece Treasure Cup from Birmingham over in the UK. My name's Ross and I'm joined once again for our lovely top 8 action by Ben. How you doing, Ben?
I'm very, very good, Ross, after seeing a fantastic mirror that went into overtime and went into extra turns, and Panda managing to take it home and get his way into top 8. And, well, I think we might be in a bit of a house of mirrors today because we've got another one in top 8.
Yeah, I literally drove 5 hours to avoid kids fighting. And now I get to sit here and watch kids fighting for an hour. Oh, I'm going to get down drinking on stream.
Oh, that is brilliant.
I'm so proud of myself for that one. But we have got a Eustace Captain Kid mirror. That is what we've got going on here. We've had a Kaido mirror, we've got a Kid mirror. You've been doing some good work in between rounds. You've been way more productive than I have. You found something. Now, this isn't confirmed, but we're pretty sure we got the top 16 decks, and it was 6 Kid, 4 Kaido, 4 Law. Now, there was one Don Quixote do Flamingo and 1 Luffy, but we can confirm they lost in top 16, so they're definitely out. The rest of this tournament, we've got Kid, we've got Kaido, we've got Law. 2 surprising things about that. Law, like we said, being represented more heavily than we were expecting, and I suppose you could argue Kaido a little bit as well, and straight red.
Yeah.
We're in top 8, we're out of straight red decks. There are no mono red decks. Luffy or Zoro, which one's better? Nobody cares. They're all gone.
Yeah, and it was a heartbreaking way for Luffy deck to lose in the top 16 match, apparently losing to a Trafalgar Law player due to the third tiebreaker with characters on board. Both the exact same amount of life taken, both the exact same amount of cards in deck. I don't know what kind of mathematical probability that it is for that to happen, but it went to characters on board, and in the Doflamingo deck, sadly falling to a Eustace Captain Kid deck due to cards in deck. But we shouldn't be surprised that we're seeing Captain Kid mirror here. It was the most represented going into the top 16, and that's what we expected, what we said at the start of day 1, that this was going to be a big deck to beat, Ross.
Yeah, and I hate to say it to you, but we could be seeing another game going to time here. I do, a lot of respect for both the players, both rocking that super pre-release Kid, and they've both got it in a nice hard plastic case, because those super pre-release leaders, they were on sale in September. They ain't coming back. So if you've got those super pre-release leaders, if you're lucky enough to be in that position, keep them very, very nicely, because if you're going to be playing these in years to come, there's a lot to go. We've got Timo and Alexandra here, so we've got a couple of players who have come over for this, and these are good players. 9-1, 8-2. Of course, got to give a bit of love to Alexandra here, because actually there were only 6, I told you, 6 out of 32, I ran the numbers. 6 out of 32 players went X and 2 and actually made top cut. Alexandra was one of those ones that did. Of course, we saw one of them lose in the previous round. To come as one of the very few X2s to make it into top cut, and then have the audacity to beat an X1 in your top 16 match, that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, he's done a lot of hard, good work to get here. Not even just today, like you say, beating one of those X1 players to make it into a top 8, but even to be able to go home, lose 2 games and still be able to make it inside, and playing a deck that is very, very consistent, right? We all know about the nightmares of the 7 costs and the 8 cost kids, the 5 cost Trafalgar Law blocker being able to be a real nuisance, sitting behind and protecting that 8 cost kid, and then just forcing it to be, well, you're either going to attack this or you're not going to take life. So it'll be interesting to see how either of these players are going to approach this mirror matchup. I imagine that there will have been some kind of teching here as opposed to the Kaido mirror matchup. Both players maybe not necessarily forecasting that there was going to be too much Kaido out in the field, but Kid was always going to be a bit of a poster boy in this top 16, and that's what we've got right here.
Well, I had a chat with Panda in the interview, who told me they were expecting Kaido to be one of the most played decks in the event, and they said, they were playing, the full 4-10 cost exactly for that reason. So I was surprised to hear that, quite frankly. No one's going to be surprised to hear you're teching against Kid. Everyone knew Kid was going to be one of the big decks coming in. I really feel like we've now got 3 treasure cups happening this weekend. One of them taken down by Law. One of them, remember who won over in the US?
Luffy.
It was Luffy in the US, and then here. So, it's not that red is bad, and it's not that red is not being represented, but considering the amount of hype red had coming into this event, it really underscores, one of the themes we've been going through this weekend, which is we really don't know much about this game, this format at the moment. It's all very, very new. And I am interested to see how the player base, we've got a few more weekends of Treasure Cups to come, I'm going to be really excited to see what the player base does in response to this. Whether Kaido sees an uptick in play, whether Law sees an uptick in play, whether Red kind of gets set aside a little bit, but it does look like we're ready. We've got life, we've got a fist bump, and we've got to start to our top 8 game. It's Tebow against Alexandra. It is Kid against Kid. And do we have any lovely one drops to start the game?
Well, we'll see who's going to take the initiative and is going to get the first turn, just making sure that both those leaders were in their right place, making sure that full Super Pre-Release artwork was being shown off, and it is just a turn 1 pass from Tebow's side of the field.
Yeah, it's not what you want to do. You want to get, a 1 cost out turn 1. That's kind of the whole point. There are a lot of turn 1 characters. Obviously, you've got the searchers, you've got your 1 cost blockers. It does look like we've got a Shang-Chi Penguin combination in at least one of these decks. I'm a fan of that Shang-Chi. I feel vindicated. So we actually chose then. Now, we did see Alexander did have at least a component in hand. Chooses not to play it, keeps the cards in hand. So we get to Tebow's second turn. We've got no cards played, but we do have a life taken. Tebow does take it out, and then we see the Okiku there. Of course, that is one of those cards we see played in all of these green decks, whether dual or monocolor, because Don X1, when attacking, rest a character, cost 5 or less, and that can be huge going through this game.
And this, I think, is going to be a really big game in this, a big card in this mirror match for tempo and for board control. A lot of the cards that need to be played in the early setup phases for this deck are 5 cost or less, although there is Nekomamushi to rest Okiku down, and Tebow rightfully is just going to protect away that Okiku being swung on there from the 7k Captain Kid leader. But it's going to be huge, this Okiku, in the early game. If Tebow can keep this one alive, keep the Don underneath it, keep trying to chip away for 6,000, rest a lot of these other cards and swing follow-up with a leader or another character card that Tebow might have in his back pocket, this could get out of hand quite quickly.
Yeah, this one could escalate. And it's one of those things, we could see a very tense back and forth, or we could see one player just really drawing better, taking the initiative, getting the right KOs at the right time, really kind of running away with this. Of course, we know these games can go long, and that makes game 1 crazy important, because the thing is, in game 1, if I win game 1 and game 2 doesn't finish, I win the match. And both players, you've got to think, know this. So if game 1 could easily take over half an hour, we've seen that. So we could see game 1 determining the entire match here. So this game 1 is extremely important, and we might see a little bit of a more measured pace of play from the players for this reason. See, at the moment we've had very little happening. We've had a couple of swings, we've not got much on the board. I think Tebow's up here, and we've got...
Yeah, you've just seen Tebow there as well, just in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. He was just racking his brain. He wasn't 100% sure about what he wants to do. There's sort of sequencing here. Next, just swing with the Captain Kid, takes the life, and then plays down 5-cost Basil Hawkins, electing just to keep behind the Okiku.
I love the Basil Hawkins, because Basil Hawkins lets you KO a character and then restand. As long as you battle a character, you get to restand. Okiku will rest characters. So there's a really fun combination here where you can use the 2 of those to start taking out characters, multiple characters per turn with Basil Hawkins, can get a pair of them. And when you've got a deck playing lots of small characters, Basil Hawkins taking out 2 in one go, that can be a big swing in the game. So I really like getting that down. And especially with the Okiku being able to rest one, making it a valid target, I'm kind of liking this from Tebow here.
Yeah, it's a really nice little play, and something to keep in mind as well. And remember that Nekomamushi only has 3,000 power, so that demands a lot of counter power from Alexander's side of the field if it gets swung into with even just the Okiku or the leader Captain Kid with no Don underneath it. But there goes Izo.
Now Izo very similar to Okiku. We see these played as a pair in these green decks. Izo is resting on play, not on attack, but we see there the attack coming in from Kid, and Okiku's gone.
Yeah, and that's a big way to try and combat these mono green decks. It's just try and fight fire with fire, get the board control for yourself while denying your opponent the on-field resources, and getting rid of that Okiku is massive. It means that you can't rest down that Nekomamushi to make it an easy target. Basil Hawkins then can't go ahead and restand the Okiku to go in for an extra swing at the leader and that life. That's a really, really high level play. It shows why Alexander's in top 8.
Yeah, both these players, and that's the thing, right? That the top cut in this tournament is harsh. Like, no argument there. We started with 500 players, it was just a shade under, and we cut to top 16. That's really mean. What it means is that the players who made top 16 are great, and speaking of great, hey, it's a 7-cost Captain or Eustace Captain Kid. It's a blocker, and if you've got a Don under it, it restands at the end of your turn. Block, attack, repeat to fade.
Yeah, and this continues to work in as well with that Basil Hawkins that is still on the field. With it being a 5-cost, a little bit harder to try and rest down. Obviously the Ezo won't get there, but this is a really, really marked shift now from Tebow. He is very happy to start getting on top onto this curve, get those 7 costs and 8 costs out. We'd have to imagine that there is going to be an 8 cost lurking somewhere in the not too distant future. So this is a really, really positive start from Tebow. And if you notice, Alexander, he's already down to 2 life.
Yeah. It's been lots of cheeky swings. We've not seen these giant swings that we've seen in other games. It's been basically every turn Tebow just attacks with his leader. It's like, come on, get through, and it gets through. Now whether Alexander is deliberately, because remember, giving up that life puts extra cards in your hand, can give you an advantage. If you think you can withstand the onslaught in the late game, that's good. And although red has a lot of tricks to get around blockers, green really doesn't. So giving up the life early game, in game 1 where the tiebreakers are not going to be an issue, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but that is the question. Is Alexander going, I'll take a couple extra cards, that's fine, I'll deal with it later, or is it actually going really badly?
Yeah, he's got about 9 or 10 cards there in his hand, and I see a few 1-cost opportunities there as well. I think I saw Jewelry Bonnie as he was flickering through, so that's an option to try and get him a little bit more ball presence, get him a couple of extra characters around. But it is just a bit of an odd situation. Obviously, you've got that imminent threat of the Eustace Captain Kid, which restands after the end of the turn anyway. You've got the Basil Hawkins. That'll certainly help try and deal with some stuff.
Yeah, that one's going to be quite fun. Though we do see the 8-cost Captain Kid is here. It's not activated, it's not rested, it has no dom. When it is activated, the only target of an attack is that character, not the leader, not any other characters, but you do need a Don under it, and you do need it to be rested in order to have that skill on the board. So it's there threatening, and I mean, is there anything Tebow can do to take it out before it becomes super annoying here?
Doesn't seem like it from judging on his hand at the moment. The Okiku, it won't be an Okiku trap wouldn't be in reach because it's an 8 cost.
Yep.
There'd be no real way. Obviously, you can only attack a character on the field if it is rested. As long as it's active, it cannot be targeted for any kind of attack. So there's no other blockers, however, on the side of the field of Alexander. Yes, he's got a big grip full of cards in hand, so you imagine that any kind of counters that can be played down will be in Alexander's hand. So perhaps it might be a better play to just pretend that 8 cost isn't there and just go swing for the fences.
I mean, for the time being, I think you get all the attacks off you can this turn. I want something down, but honestly, although it is a blocker, you do have the opportunity to attack with that Captain Kid.
There it goes.
So maybe next turn, if the 8-cost Kid is rested next turn, the 7-cost might be the answer to it. But we see an attack going through again. Alexander's down to 1 life here. This could get awkward quickly.
And now the Okiku coming down as well. Obviously, it needs a Don underneath it. X-Drake as well on the follow-up. Pass of the turn will re-stand up that 7-cost Eustace Captain Kid, and now Alexander just wringing his hands together. I'm not quite sure whether that's indication of it's time to feast or whether it's I'm in a little bit of a pickle here. He's got that 8-cost Captain Kid ready to put the Don underneath it, ready to make it the only valid target, but if he's just allowed 8,000 power to go through onto his life, what is he hanging back to try and protect the 8,000 power of that 8-cost Kid?
Well, it might literally just be saying, I don't care about my life right now. If you take my life, that just gives me card advantage. Again, there are some decks, if I'm against red, I don't let them do this so much, because they have tricks to get around blockers. So that's kind of awkward. But if I'm comfortable that I'm going to have blockers in the late game, if I'm comfortable in my ability to counter, then I know I can withstand attack after attack after attack, and I can give up the life in the early game. I'm not saying it's the best play, I'm not saying it's the right play, I'm not saying it's the wrong play, but I am saying that we've seen against some decks that don't have those tricks, you can go down to like no life and survive turn after turn after turn after turn. The question for Alexander here is he planning something? Is he deliberately keeping these cards back so he can protect his kid because that's his major plan? Or is the game actually going really badly?
Here comes another Ezo. Sorry to cut you off there, as there is the swing in from the Captain Kid to take the Okiku out. So now Captain Kid is rested, and there is I know personally from me and from my experience, there is nothing scarier than sitting across the table from a good Captain Kid player with a lot of cards in hand. So many tricks up the sleeve, thinking that you're going to be able to swing in, maybe this time the attack will go through, maybe this time I'll be able to finally get away from that pesky Captain Kid, and your opponent goes, no, here's 3,000 pounds worth of counter, no, here's a Paradise Waterfall, or a Punk Gibson. It is a very, very tentative place to try and be into, and Tebow only has 2 cards in his hand himself, so there's not really much protection going on from his side of the field currently.
I mean, I like you, Ben, but you're being ridiculous here. The scariest thing is a 10-cost Kaido, and we all know this. But your point was an excellent point. And this is what I was saying about Alexander, maybe just willingly giving up that life to have this huge hand. Because we've seen in previous games, you want that Captain Kid to remain on the field. And what Alexander might be doing here is going, look, I've got enough counters and other tricks here to just protect this kid for turn after turn. The thing that worries me is the lack of blockers. Alexander's got no blockers on the field. Okay, there's a complaint. That's nice. I want these blockers out. You can joke about that. They can't hear me sometimes. We've had to rearrange the room so they can't hear me because I'm very loud. But we do see the killer coming down. There's another blocker, which is lovely. And you've got the Don Unders draw a card when blocking. And this is kind of what I was expecting from Alexander. If you give up all that life early doors, it is not the end of the world if you can have that rested kid and protect it. And these next couple of turns are going to show us what Alexander's made of in this particular game, because this is what it's going to come down to. I feel confident if Tebow takes down that kid, the game's going to be over. But maybe with the giant hand that Alexander's got, that might be enough.
Ooh, that's a big draw there and big play initially, just straight as the turn passes over. Nekomamushi to tap down that killer. That killer would have been the first port of call, I think, for Alexander to utilise to block because of that on-KO ability, drawing yourself an extra card, getting yourself an extra counter or an event card in hand. We see that there's 2 Don up on Alexander's side of the field, so he is hinting at possibilities of a Paradise Waterfall or a Punk Gibson. But Tebow at 9-1, he'll be able to recognise this. He has played through undoubtedly so many of these Captain Kid mirrors, and here we go, target number 1.
Yeah, we see the blocker kid from the starter deck coming in, throwing out an attack, and I mean it's got enough at the moment, yeah, so it's even. So it wouldn't take much. Any counter at all will do it. And we know Alexander's got a counter. There's no way there's no counter. We see a scratch with a poo there, so there's definitely a counter of some description. It's just a question of, I mean, he's not going to give it up. The question is which cards you give up for the counter. There is no question of whether the counter's coming down. And it is either a Shachi or a Penguin. They're basically the same card. Don't make me pick between them. But one of them does hit the discard pile here. And now we see Basil Hawkins getting some stuff. Is this going to come down?
Yeah, so that's 4 Don being placed underneath the Basil Hawkins. It's going to swing in and it will restand as well. There's just a little bit of a discussion going on here between judges about when that restand actually kicks into effect. But this is a pretty hefty swing coming in. This is 10,000, I believe, if my maths is right, against the Captain Kid, and it is going to finally force in the Capone blocker. Now the Hawkins will correctly restand once the attack has been finished off. And I think from Alexander's point of view, you wanted to try and use that blocker as late as possible, because now here comes an even bigger swing with that Iron Fist of the leader.
Yeah, and this is why I like Basil Hawkins. It's why I like Tebow's setup. I mean, it's really good. Also, as a side note, yes, fine, it was Shachi. I know it's Shachi. You can tell from the 4,000 power and the fact he's looking right, not left. Fine, it was Shachi. But I am loving these attacks here from Tebow. I like everything we've got going on with all of this, Don. Now, you called it yourself there, Ben. We do see a Paradise Waterfall, which gives 2,000 power and activates one of your characters or restands it, and oh look, Killer's back.
Yeah, Killer's back, and a turn passed over as well. So that Killer is going to be allowed to be blocking very soon as well. The Don just being peeled off. The turn has been passed over. How much power does... I believe Paradise Waterfall is only 2,000, correct?
Paradise Waterfall is a plus 2,000.
It is a plus 2,000, so that's 10,000 into... That would have been equal, no? The Killer needs to die here. If he's restanding the Killer from the Paradise Waterfall, it's still even power from... Oh, no, it's because it was with the leader kid.
Yes,
that's
the leader kid came in with the attack.
I was believing that the Basil Hawkins went and really swung in. That's my mistake. But now we do get to see Jewellery Bonnie. Quite astonishing actually that we're 10-15 minutes into this game and into this round, and we're only now seeing a jewellery bunny from both of these green players.
Yeah, it's 15 minutes in, we finally see the jewellery bunny hitting the field. One of the biggest cards we've got, really in this entire deck. It's a phenomenal card. It's the one, you pay one, you look at the top 5 cards, you find yourself a supernova, pop it in your hand. We don't have a lot of traditional search in One Piece. Generally the search we see is quite minimal. It's on a KO, grab a particular kind of character, things of that nature. This is the search we have in this game. Look at the top, usually 5 cards of your deck, and grab the best one you can from there. And if that's the best we've got, you better believe players are going to take advantage of it.
And we see how good it is in other card games and stuff like that. Obviously, from our Pokemon background, searching is one of the key tenets of the game, with cards like Quick Ball and Ultra Ball and even Pokemon Communication all the way back when. So being able to search through, get your specific resources that you need at that moment is so vital to any kind of card game, and especially here in One Piece, where you've only got a 50 card deck as well, so the resources are likely to run dry. Don underneath both the killer and the kid, setting them both up for their respective effects, and the first life finally being taken from Courtois, or from T-Bag.
Yeah, we do see a life finally going down. T-Bag's down to 4 here. Alexander, though, still sitting on that 1 life remaining. And it is that kid. It is that 8-cost kid. If that 8-cost kid wasn't there, I'm pretty sure Timo wins already. But that kid there is just such an awkward one. And it's it basically has got a skill that says it is the only target. No leader, just this character. And what that means is that you can use your blockers or you can counter, but you're always countering from a base of 8,000, which means your opponent has to get a really big attack to force you to use a blocker, and then you can start countering. And it's when there's no blockers and you can't counter high enough, that's when the kid goes down. And until then, we see this weird stalemate where you just can't get any further in the game. And when one player's got kid, the other one doesn't. Don't get me wrong, Tebo's ahead in this game, but you see Alexander here is just clawing back and just making these little inroads, which we would expect to see at this stage with this kind of setup.
Yeah, now he's just starting to flood his field with blockers and things like that as well. We saw the Capone there being put down just to round out Alexander's turn, and it is a really, really difficult situation for Tebow to try and be in here, because there's cards in hand for Alexander, not as many as there were the turn before he was swinging into this 8-cost kid, granted, but there is still options here. He's got 2 blockers on board to be able to throw away to protect at least off of 2 attacks. There will be an extra 2 you'd have to imagine that will come forward. It just depends on what kind of order and what kind of sequencing that Tebow wants to try and go with to deal with this 8-cost kid.
Yeah, it's so awkward to try and get rid of. And he's got 6,000 on board, another 6,000 and 7,000. There are some characters there, but you kind of need to beef them up. You've got to put a Don just to get to 8,000, just to have a chance of getting through. And then your opponent can start countering or using one of their 2 blockers on the board. You see Capone and Killer are both on the board, and we do see Scratchman and Pooh coming down there, just uses a counter. Now we see 2 Don coming under Basil Hawkins and another attack into the kid. But we know that if Alexander can't counter, there's 2 different blockers that can be used. Kid's going to draw a card if he uses a blocker, Killer, sorry. So that's kind of the thing. There's so many options. That kid is so hard to get rid of when it comes out on the field. And I honestly do think getting that big hand of cards at the beginning, giving up that life, getting those few extra options, I think that has really helped out Alexander in this particular position. The question is going to be whether the trade-off was worth it. Can Alexander keep this going long enough to make it worth giving up that life in the early game?
Well, there goes another counter. So there's 2 more attacks definitely coming with X-Drake and Captain Kidd if he wants to try and commit the Don underneath. So the 2 blockers can easily go down. And the thing with this as well is that when you replenish your board with these lower cost blockers like these Capones and like these Killers, you can just continue to freely poke away with the 8-cost Captain Kidd, because he needs to be turned sideways and rested anyway for his ability to take into effect. So you can just sit behind these blockers and just kind of lob over the top this giant wall of fedora hats and massive scimitars.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you've got your leader there. You can have a little bit of a poke with as well. And you don't need all these to go through. You don't expect them all to go through. But I think it's an excellent point you make there. The fact that, you know what, just give it a go. Like, the main thing you're doing here is frustrating your opponent. If you can sneak a couple of attacks through, but he hasn't. And I think that's really crucial here. Alexander hasn't snuck a couple of attacks through. He snuck through exactly one. There is one single attack that has snuck through here. He's taken one life away from Tebow, and his hand has been whittled down. A lot of resources have been expended. Now, there's still a couple blockers on the field, and that's lovely. But Tebow's actually got a pretty good setup here with both the 7-cost captain kids. Hasn't found an 8-cost of his own yet, and you've got to imagine that's just a draw issue at this stage. So if he had one, he'd be playing it. So Tebow's, this is the kind of the storm we expect when you play against green. And honestly, Tebow's weathering it pretty nicely right now.
Yeah, it is very much into the control kind of mindsets of these green bills that we've seen quite familiarly. I know I've certainly seen it around my local community and my local game store. It is very, very intimidating. There's another little poke from Basil Hawkins that will provoke a life, and I believe with only the one Don underneath that Basil Hawkins as well, that does have the ability to restand if he wants to. I think we've just been so used to seeing Basil Hawkins with 2 Don underneath it from Tebow, but it is just a Don X1 ability for that Basil Hawkins to restand.
Yeah, but you've got to put the 2 there to make it up to 8,000 to make it worth swinging into the kid. You're right, you only need the 1 for the ability, but the whole... Like, you're basically just waiting for that turn. The problem is, the turn Alexander can't counter, he's going to block the killer. And then the next turn after that he can't counter, he's going to block with a Capone. And hopefully in the meantime, he's going to get another blocker or 2 out onto the field. And this is why I said at the beginning, game 1 is so important. Because this is what happens in kid mirrors. We see turn after turn after turn with little happening. Although... And saying that, in the past couple of turns, Alexander has whittled Tebow down from 4 life down to 1 very quickly, and this is what Alexander needed. It wasn't working a couple of minutes ago, Ben. I've changed my mind, now it's working.
Yeah, he's just started to step on the accelerator a little bit, shift up the gears, he's pulled the handbrake off as well, and used his captain kid, both the 8-cost and the leader there, you see, got 6 Don attached underneath it to have a big, mega swing. Either there is a Nekomamushi resting the killer, that will be very, very vital. But if you're Alexander, you're not too worried if this card goes down, if this killer gets targeted to try and clear away for a next turn swing, because you're going to draw a card off of it anyway. That's the best of both worlds. You're going to get that extra counter or possibility for an event in hand, and, you know, your kid's still safe.
Yeah, and Alexander's doing Alexander things here. We saw the swing for the 7-cost kid, but it got countered. We're seeing a swing from the other 7-cost kid, countered with the secret rare Yamato. One of my favourite green cards is does not see a huge amount of play. It's got double attack and banish. It's great. Does 2 damage, and neither of those cards go to your hand. They go to the trash instead. But we've not seen Yamato hit the board yet this tournament, and we've not seen it again here. So, again, Alexander is doing a phenomenal job here of just keeping things ticking along very nicely. It's very slow, it's very measured, it's protect the kid, do a couple of swings, cross your fingers, and it is working like a charm.
But for how much longer? Because now Alexander is motioning that the Capone needs to be used to block. He's only got 2 more cards left in hand. This leader has not swung in yet, neither has the X-Drake. So it could be an opportunity now to see that Captain Kid finally getting dealt with. Basil Hawkins will now re-swing again after standing.
Oh, and he finally goes down. Chooses to keep the... Oh, no, wait, the killer's rested, of course. The killer can't be used. And there's more swings remaining. And you said that yourself a second ago. We've got X-Drake that can still swing. We've got Eustace Captain Kid that can still swing. Do we have any Dawn? I think there's some Dawn even that can be attacked to Nekomamushi. So that can have a little bit of a swing. And this is kind of like the floodgates have opened. And this is what we see against these green decks. When you take out the kids, you can open the floodgates.
And the Nekomamushi there being used to counter from the X-Drake swing. No Dom was attached onto it, so it was just a simple vanilla 6k. And then a swing going in. Looks like taking out the Basil Hawkins there from the leader, Captain Kid. That's an interesting strategy to take there from Tebow, but he's just stopping that ability from what he's just done there to Alexander to restand that Basil Hawkins and try and help close out this game.
Yeah, I love it because we know Basil Hawkins can be a real pain. We've seen it in this game. I love getting rid of that. But now we see the 8-cost Captain Kid has gone. And that was Alexander's basically entire plan at this stage. And we saw when that fell, the rest of the cards went down. And do we see the cards being picked up here?
Yes.
We do. So that means, I'm assuming that means that Tebow went and won game one. And when the Kid goes down, yeah, we go. There's the official confirmation. Tebow wins game one. And when that Kid goes down, that is it. The floodgates open. The characters start falling, and Alexander doesn't even wait for Tebow to take the last of the life and just goes and concedes the game. And I like the concession here. Yeah. This is a good concession because that game took 25 minutes. That game could have taken an extra 5. We could have seen an extra 5 minutes of that game. And you know what? That might have meant that game 2 doesn't finish. And if game 2 doesn't finish, the winner of game 1 is the winner of the match. So what Alexander basically said was, I have lost this game. I know I'm not winning this game. Let's not waste 5 minutes I might need. Now for Alexander, look, we've seen this matchup. The hope is win game 2, win the tiebreakers. We ain't going to see 3 full games here. It's not happening. Win game 2, win the tiebreakers. Whereas for Tebow here, it's win game 2, or don't, honestly, just make sure Alexander doesn't. But with a 10 minutes overtime and 35 minutes left, I do think it might be close, but I do think we are going to see a conclusion to this second game here. But I do think we're going to see a slightly faster pace of play, especially from Alexander here, who knows that they kind of need to get a shift on and win this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine for Tebow, the game plan here trying to go into this game too will be what Alexander did to him. Get that 8-cost Kid out early, protect it around with a load of blockers, get a lot of counter in your hands, utilise some of those cards like Jewellery Bonnie and Momonosuke probably quite early on to get all those counters quite healthily, and then drop the 8 Kid, get a load of those blockers around, and then all of a sudden you've got about a fifth of your deck in hand ready to counter and event card usage. Like you say rightfully there, Tebow doesn't necessarily need to win game 2 in order to progress into the semi-finals of this Treasure Cup. He's currently up a game to nothing, but Alexander will be looking to attack early.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be the plan here. And I do find it really interesting that Tebow didn't get the 8-cost Kid. Yes. Which is often kind of like, it's often a big thing in this particular game. And what I really like about Tebow's play there, whether he wanted the 8-cost Kid or not, and from what we've seen, they generally do, he went, right, okay, I've not got the 8-cost Kid. And he gave up a bunch of life in the process, but it was kind of like Alexander slammed the door and Tebow just kept banging. Just kept banging on the door, banging on the door, banging on the door. Lots of attacks that he didn't really expect to go through. There was turn after turn where all of the attacks were just countered with 1 card. And he kept going, and he kept going. And eventually Alexander ran out of cards, and that was the end of the game. But we are going here, and Alexander starts off with one of those lovely searching cards.
Yeah, it's a really, really great start off for Alexander. Pulling that Momonosuke out, getting ready to turn it sideways, as he does there, as well as the Captain Kid leader going sideways, taking the first life straight away. And then you can see already from the way that these two players have just started off game 2, they're really starting to go off to the races and play with a little bit more pep in their step.
Yeah, if you're Tebow, you're feeling pretty confident. If you're Alexander here, you know that you're down a game and you can't really afford to be down a game. So you need to try and fix that nice and quickly. We saw the first life being poked away there. And we saw in the early game, especially from Tebow, those little pokes, they kind of went through. You don't want to expend those resources early you want to save them for the later game. So a lot of these earlier pokes can go through, and I know that you get the card advantage, etc., but sometimes getting a couple of pokes through early, a couple of big attacks later, that could be enough to win the game.
Yeah, it's 4 Don it looks like being turned, or it's just a 3 Don, I beg your pardon, turned sideways there. It's paying for Okiku. I could just see in the hand there of Tebow a card that we've not seen a lot of on stream, but could actually be really, really important to try and do exactly what we said in the break, to try and flat out this board, get some of those cards out early, and then drop an 8-cost Kid all of a sudden. It's Beppo from Romance Dawn.
Yeah, we love some Beppo. It's one of those cards, it does see play. Beppo comes around here and there. It is not the biggest card. I think that's fair to say. It is not a card that everybody plays. It's not a staple in every deck. But it can be a little bit useful here and there. There's some love to be had for Beppo.
Yeah, and interestingly as well, at TCG Con a couple of weeks ago, Ryan Severin actually played for Beppo in his list when he went to top 4 in that tournament. So it's certainly a card that's got a lot of utility, especially in this deck. You've got a lot of Heart Pirates that are in there that you can combo off of, get a couple of extra bodies onto that board as soon as you start swinging with it, making it the 5k with the Don X1 attachment as well.
Yeah, it's got a skill that you get to play a Heart Pirate other than Beppo, 4 cost or less, when you attack with a Don attached. So it's just a way of cheating extra cards into play, honestly, as a nominal attack. It's not a great attacker by any stretch, but it's good enough. Now, it does seem like we see an attack here. No, we don't. We see a search, gets that waterfall out, so that event card we know now is in Alexander's hand. That could come in handy in a turn or two's time when Tebow starts attacking again. So again, we've got quite a muted start here. Alexander, as they did lose a Momonosuke, that did go and get KO'd last turn by the leader, so that is in the trash for a reason. But we've not got any big characters, and the Okiku gets then rested by the Momonosuke, by the Nekomamushi. Man, lots of similar sounding cards here. And then gets KO'd by the leader.
Well, it's double counted actually.
It is double counted, you're right.
Starter deck X-Drake being thrown into the trash pile as well. That is not a card that we have seen whatsoever so far in this tournament. Don X1, the alternative, if this character is rested, then one Supernova or Navy character or leader gains an extra 1,000 power. And
it's all of them. All of them gain an extra 1,000 power. It is a blanket extra 1,000 to all your Supernova and Navy characters and leader if it's got a Don and is rested. It's a card which I was expecting to see a bit more play, because under the right circumstances that is a big boost, but of course it only works when it's rested, and guess what your opponent's going to do on their next turn?
Yeah,
they're going to KO it.
But however, I cannot help but think that this is the kind of card, this is the kind of tech option that comes in and helps this mirror out, right? Because you get that extra wash wide 1,000 power, all of a sudden that 7 cost kid turns into 8,000. So without any Don being committed, already you're threatening that to go down. Then you start committing the extra Don, and it becomes a lot more threatening and a lot more difficult for your opponent to try and deal with.
Yeah, speaking of that 7 cost kid, we see that going down on Alexander's side of the board. Big blocker that can restand at the end of the turn if it's got a Don underneath it. Attack, block, attack, block, attack, block. Love that card. Brilliant card. So here, we've got Basil Hawkins on the field, we've got a Kiku on the field. Now, really what Tebow's looking for here is a real attacking threat. Yes, we like Basil Hawkins, but we both know Basil Hawkins is better for going after characters. What we're looking for is basically one of the 2 kids. That's what we want.
And there's 7, 8 Don, 6, 7, 8. There is 8 Don. There is 8 Don from Tebow. So if he does have the 8 cost Captain Kid, he is available to drop it straight away. He clearly does not.
But he does play Nekomamushi to rest Nekomamushi. And we see a KO with the leader on.
Nekomamushi.
He's down.
So then following that up with a third Okiko.
It is an Okiko world and we're just living in it. There are 3 of them there, all of which can be resting smaller characters, all of which can then, be valid targets. You need to stress again, you're not allowed to attack active characters. If you want to take out a character, it must be rested. You know what's good at resting characters? Okiku. It's a fine attacker, right? 5,000 is the minimum, because leader has 5,000, tie goes to the attacker, so 5,000 is the minimum number you need to have a realistic chance of getting an attack through. It can be countered easily, but at least it's an option. And basically Tebow's there going, you know what, I can attack with all of these, and I'm either going to run you out of a bunch of counters, or I'm going to get a couple of attacks through, and unlike being blocked, if I attack and fail, I survive, so you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to keep throwing these Okiku at you and see if some of them go through. Because there aren't many things to rest there, sorry.
And the nice thing as well about having these Okikus is clear that he's kind of learned from the game one that he's just seen against Alexander. Being able to rest down those characters rests away those blockers. So if any of those Captain Kids decide to make their way into the field from Alexander's side of the field, and then he can back that up with those cards like Killer and Capone that we saw in the first game, he can just rest them. And then all of a sudden, it's 2 extra resources that Alexander doesn't have to be able to protect one of the biggest sweepers in this deck.
Absolutely. It's not relevant now. It could be in the future. But quietly, Alexander has just taken the last life away from Tebow. And there are no blockers on the board. I told you this game was going to be long. I told you this game was going to go to time. It might not. We might not finish this game. I shouldn't say stuff like that. It's like the game is out trying to prove me wrong. As it stands at the moment, Tebow has no blockers on the board. And if I'm Alexander at this stage, I'm thinking, I got a 7,000 power character. Or is it a 17,000 power character? Time I put 10 Don on there. And I don't know, maybe it's just my overly aggressive silliness coming into play. I love the idea of swinging with 17,000 power and going, you can't block this. Like, you can't counter this. I refuse to believe you have 13,000 power worth of counter. And you just need to force one attack through. Tebow needs a blocker here. And judging by the body language we're seeing and the fact that one hasn't hit the board, I don't think Tebow's got a blocker. And I'm looking at Tebow's hand and I'm not seeing a blocker. I'm seeing an 8-cost kid, and it's got to be. That's the only way he kind of survives next turn at this rate.
Well, if your game plan usually is Roscoe Zoom, I think putting 10 Don underneath the leader would be Roscoe Supersonic.
Not the leader, the kid, because the kid's got 2,000 more power.
Yes.
Then it's a 17,000 go Zoom. That's what I'm thinking. But he chooses... No, okay, so he's attacking with Akiku now.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure I saw the 8-cost kid in his hand. We didn't see it being played. He needs a way to stop an attack next turn. And, it's as silly as it is, Alexander can legit have a 17k swing next turn.
Yes.
And you can't counter that. That's too much. So if you don't have a blocker, you need a way to redirect that attack, and this is the only option. So we do see Killer coming out with the Akiku here. We see a bunch of swings from Tebow, but this isn't going to win him the game right now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange situation, I think, for both of these players to be in. You're absolutely right. Tebow needs blockers on board to be able to help try and survive in this next turn, but he's able to chip Alexander all the way down now to 2 life. There's no 8-cost kid on the board for Alexander, so it's not like he's gathering cards in hand ready for a counter, unless that's what he's looking for off of one of the life, maybe, hoping that he's going to find his 8-cost kid and just go, well, here, enjoy.
Yeah, basically. Tebow's in desperation mode here. Something needs to happen. It needs to be a blocker, or it needs to be the 8-cost kid. I refuse to believe he's got enough counters to stave off a 17,000 power attack right now, and he's got no life to kind of delay the game any longer. Tebow needs something so he can pass to Alexander and not just lose the game. And honestly, what Alexander could do here is put 5 Don on the leader and 5 on the Captain Kid and have 2 big swings if you're that worried about odd things. But although, to be honest, 117k swing would probably be better, more beneficial. My point is, it doesn't really matter. Now, we do see Trafalgar Law coming down. It's finally a blocker, but it's not... This seems very much like a delaying kind of tactic. What I will say is, Tebow's got a lot of attackers who can potentially get through. Alexander doesn't. That wide board of Tebow's next turn could actually really start swinging this game. That one blocker might actually be enough.
Yeah, and now the onus comes back onto Alexander to say, well, now you need to start solidifying your board control as well. It's all well and good you taking him with a couple of swings, but also look below on the top right corner of your screen. Tebow's got 5 Don open as well. So that could be a lot of event cards coming in from the grip that Tebow has. Here comes a 9,000 swing from the 7-cost Captain Kid. Just tempted whether to block this one away with the Law.
He's got a Punk Gibson in hand, which could do a +4. There is the Punk Gibson.
There it goes.
And the Nekamamushi as well, just to kind of act as a bit of a counter. Lovely. The box topper Nekamamushi, one we don't see coming out too often.
Yeah, really lovely. I love all the box topper artworks, those extra little full art shiny treatments. I just love anything full art and shiny, Ross, I'm not going to lie.
When I got my box at my local game store, they had a spare box topper from selling loose packs. And I got 2 box toppers in my box, and it's a little bit of a boast, I'm going to be honest with you. I love my local game store. They are amazing. But here, I think the Law there was pretty good. Alexander, here's the thing, Alexander put himself in a really good position, but he ended up with very few attacks. And that one blocker, especially with the Punk Gibson, Tebow is really flying on the edge of his seat here. But you know what? I mean, you see the attack coming in here with a leader, and maybe we got enough to counter. We got, it's a lot, but it does it. So now he's actually been able to survive with the blocker, and honestly, before that Trafalgar Law hit the field, I loved the idea of Alexander doing one big swing to win the game. But with that single blocker hitting the field now, and then actually being able to counter and keep the blocker up, because two smaller swings are generally easier to protect than a big swing, we do see the skill from Captain Kidd, restanding, and that's why, and gets a big attack to get on the Law. But actually, Tebow's in a good position.
Tebow's in a really, really nice position here. Managed to just stave off having to use that Trafalgar Law. You saw him actually a couple of times during those relative attack steps, just picking up the Law and then going, no, hang on, wait, let me consider myself. And that's the markings of a player that is trying to fight his way into the top 4. Just taking that extra moment to just go, hang on, let me just reconsider. What do I have in my hand? What kind of options do I have? Do I need to pull the trigger on this? And it's paid dividends for him now as he swings in for 7,000.
Yeah, and there's potentially 5 attacks coming out here. We got 6 attacks. We got the 4 characters. We got the leader. The leader can restand, and remember, any Don on the leader are still there when you restand. So both those attacks we've used as Captain Kidd will be there to kind of, both of them will have the extra Don on there. And there's no blockers out. So I'm pretty sure what Tebow's going to do here is just fire off attack after attack after attack, and maybe Alexander can counter a couple of them, but can he counter enough of them? I'm not sure, honestly.
Well, there is a double counter there to stop the 7,000 swing from the Okiku. The second one on the right-hand side will now swing in, and that's 6 cards in hand, it looks like, for Alexander. Now here comes a block and a Paradise Waterfall.
To restand the blocker so you can use it again. I love that play.
And importantly, keep it alive as well, getting the power level back up over the threshold. Now Here comes the leader with a 7,000 power swing in. Like you rightfully signposted earlier as well, Ross does have 4 Don open with the option to try and restand it and swing in again if this one first gets stopped.
I think there's enough countering in Alexander's hand. This is going to be close. I'm not sure Alexander is going to go down this turn. I love where Tebow's going here, but we also got to remember Tebow's not played any blockers.
Yes.
And Tebow's used a bunch of resources, and Alexander can have 3 swings next turn, 2 with the leader, 1 with the blocker, Captain Kidd. So there is a possibility here of and Alexander only needs to get 1 through. So this is a real tense back and forth game. I'm loving this game. It is really going, it looked like Alexander had the game, and then Tebow had a ridiculous amount of countering and the blocker to stop it. But we're going to be kind of in the same position in a minute, but Tebow's not going to have that blocker, and Tebow's going to have used a bunch of resources. We see the last life being taken. 7k swing with Basil Hawkins does not go through. Alexander does have just enough left to counter. Now, does he have enough cards? And it looks like Tebow just waves and goes, I don't think we're going to win this. I think we're going to a game 3. I'm pretty sure we just saw a concession from Tebow there. I think he just realised, you got 3 swings next turn. I can't do anything against those 3 swings. I cannot stop all 3 of those swings. And I think we are going to a game 3 here. Yes, here we go. See the shuffling up. I'm pretty sure, there we see the confirmation. So we did see Tebow there. Had that one last turn with all of those characters. We saw the previous turn, it looked like Alexander could get a couple of big swings, and Tebow had just enough to stop them with the blocker, with the counters. And then Tebow had that big field of characters and went, I think I can get enough attacks through. But Alexander, and I told you it was going to be close, Ben, had just enough. And we saw there, as soon as that last counter came down, Tebow was like, let's go to game 3. I'm out. And I love the concession because we might just have time for a last game if they play quickly.
Yeah, that game actually surprisingly not taking overly long. I think it looks about 20 minutes as well. So with 17 minutes left on the clock, the extra 10 minutes or 3 turns as well after it, whichever ends sooner. There's certainly a lot of time to try and get a full game 3 in here. The one thing I want to just pick up on towards the end of that second game was that I understand the wanting to try and continue on and push on with the swings, but Tebow, I'm not sure if you noticed, Ross, discarded an 8-cost kit in order to restand that leader kit to try and swing in. Was that the right move?
I'm not sure. This is something that's confusing me. Tebow hasn't had the 8-cost kill on the board yet this round. Now, game 1, I don't remember seeing it, but game 2 he had it in hand. I know he had it game 2, and he made that conscious decision not to play it. So my question is, has Tebow, and bearing in mind, Tebow's 9-1.
Yes.
And you know there's going to have been some kid mirrors in there. So I am willing to give Tebow the benefit of the doubt here and go, you know what? This is someone who's got a plan for the mirror, and it might not involve the 8-cost kid. And it works beautifully game 1, and it almost worked game 2. You know, in game 2, Tebow had the better setup, had the wide board, was so close to winning that game. We could have already been moving on to the top 4 here, but just fell that tiny bit short. Alexander had just enough countering to stop. And now, does Tebow carry on with this? Is it a deliberate decision? What's going on here? Well, Jory Bonnie, first of all.
Jory Bonnie is a nice little player as well off the start for game 3. Both players as well electing to keep their first opening hands that they drew. Did not mulligan. Remember, the mulligan rules, you're allowed 1 free mulligan if you don't like the 5-card hand that you draw for the start of the game. You're allowed to shuffle it back into your deck, draw another fresh 5 cards, but that is the 5 cards that you have to start the game with. You will then set up your life and the game will go on.
Yeah, we've got a Momonosuke on one side, we've got a Jory Bonnie on the other side. Kind of parallel starts at the moment. So herein lies the question. Do we see Tebow going wide with lots of 5,000 and 6,000 power attackers? Do we see one of the players getting that 8-cost kid out in the first few turns and really frustrating their opponent? We do see a Capone grab from the Jory Bonnie. That's a nice 1-cost blocker. And Nekomamushi is going to just take out that character.
Huge.
Yeah. Well, okay, so Nekomamushi rested it, and then Kid attacked and took it out.
Yeah.
So Kid actually did to take it out. You know what I mean?
But still, that is a massive, massive work, and you can see it right in the snap back there, right exactly there. Alexander taking out that Jory Bonnie. Both these players are both recognising how important those searches are in those loops. So as soon as they get rested, and as soon as you get one use out of them, you've got to stop them getting any more extra value. You can just find the 1 card off of it. It's a little bit of a win. You can see Alexander there. He's replenished up there with a second Momonosuke and an Akiku to boot as well.
Oh, and I love that. Playing down the blocker law, which lets you pick up a card and then play a card. And he chooses to pick up the Nekomamushi and immediately replay it to rest the Akiku. And then, yeah, I'm kind of loving this because we know that Akiku can start taking out characters as well, although, unfortunately, nothing to actually attack with, which is a little bit sad.
Yeah,
but at least it's rested and can... Oh, wait, no, it's restarted at the start of the turn.
Yes.
That actually did nothing.
Yeah,
That's a little bit sad.
I can understand the thought process behind resting the Akiku, but I think if I'm Tebow and I'm playing in this deck and in this mirror matchup, I'm taking out that Momonosuke that's now just been turned sideways, because now all of a sudden your opponent is going to get another free search, another little bit of value, try and get himself a couple of low-cost blockers. We know for a fact that Alexander has played the Shachi and Penguin combo. We saw that off of the discard in game 1. So there is a lot of blocking potential for Alexander here. So I think perhaps just a little bit of a misplay there, but that's why I'm this side of the table and I'm not the one playing out there in top 8.
Well, I'm this side of the table because I like wearing a suit, and it looks weird if you wear a suit when you're playing, but it looks fine if you're casting. But what I do find interesting, Alexander plays all those blockers, like the Shachi Penguin combination, right? And we saw in game 1, Alexander really wants that 8-cost kid and is playing the extra blockers to try and give that extra protection. We've not seen that approach from Tebow so far in this match. It's just not been something that's been on the card, so to speak. So, again, we've got Nekomamushi, we've got that blocker Trafalgar Law. Where is the pressure going to start being put on? We've got plenty of time. We've got 12 minutes plus a 10-minute overtime, or I think it was 3 turns in the end. I think it was just the 3 turns. So we've got time, but by the same token, getting ahead in life, like whereas in game 1, Alexander happily went down to 1 life and was like, we'll figure it out later. And it almost worked. Both these games have been close. I would not do that in game 3. That would be a bad idea in game 3.
Yeah, it's a very, very fine tightrope to try and walk, as you see the Captain Kid leader trying to swing in there, but Scratchman Apu just happily tossing himself to the side of the 2,000 counter and protecting that Captain Kid. Importantly as well, allowing that blocker law to stick around. So if Okiku wants to try and take a swing in, it needs to have 1 Don underneath it, be able to reach up to that 6,000 power margin.
Yeah, force your opponent to use that blocker, get rid of their resources, always a fun thing to do. Neither player really putting much pressure on here at all. We've seen, lots of resting, lots of KOing of little characters. No real pressure being put on here. And in the first couple of games, we saw lots of early game cheeky swings by the leader kid that went through and took out took out a little bit of life here and there. We're not seeing that in this game 3.
Yeah, it's a lot more of a reserved and almost kind of a quote-unquote stereotypical Captain Kidd matchup. Being able to just take your time, not really, take a little while to set things up, not go and flood things very, very quickly. There's not been too much value coming out of either the Bonnies or the Momonosuke's that have been played out from either player here. And it is just this odd stalemate. Neither player has taken, or is that actually a life taken from Alexander? I don't think it is. I think both players are actually still on 5 life.
Both players are still on 5 life. Can confirm that. The monocolour sleeves are a little bit awkward. There's definitely 5 cards there. So we are still very much tied. And we're at a stage of the game where one player needs to try and push a little bit, try to get that advantage. Yes, we got 10 minutes left. That is not a huge amount of time. Plus we got the free turns. We do see the Nekomamushi resting the Akiku, and then we're going to see, I don't know, the leader or a couple of Don on the other Nekomamushi, or something's going to take it out, right? Because that's a card you want to get rid of. But sooner or later we're going to need, there we go.
Yeah.
Sooner or later we're going to need one of these players to play a bigger card, one of the big kids, something like that, and actually start kind of pressing and taking that life. Because if the life is tied when we get to the end of the game scenario, it goes to cards in deck. And actually at this stage, Alexander's used a bunch of those searching skills that Tebow hasn't. I mean, is it fair to think about that in a game 3? Trying to play without using those searching skills in case you're tied on life? Because it's a legit tiebreaker. We've already seen at least one of the top 16 games came down to cards in deck.
Yeah.
In fact, no, 2 of them did, but one of them ended up being tied, weirdly. So it is a legit tiebreaker that gets used. Yeah,
it's a really odd position to try and force yourself to be in. I mean, Tebow has got a lot of presence on his field now, bolstered up by that 1-cost Capone just being allowed to block things down. And now if I'm Tebow, this is exactly the kind of time where I would want to be dropping that 8-cost kid next turn. You've got your blockers, you've got a couple of little characters that can try and do a little bit of poking, a little bit of sticking, try and chip away at that life that so far has remained untouched. But you want the 8-cost kid now to really, really solidify the pressure that you're currently threatening.
Yeah, we see the counter coming down there to stave off the attack from the Captain Kidd. And these are the little attacks that may have been let through in games 1 and 2. I do not think it's a coincidence that with less than 9 minutes remaining in game 3, this is where we see the players just not willing to give up a life at all. We do see Basil Hawkins come down. It's a competent attacker, certainly against a field of low-cost characters. This could be relevant.
Yeah, just counting out his Don there. I think he's drawn up the new Don for turn as well there, has Tebow.
Looks like he's counted 7, so 7-cost kid?
Could possibly be. There is the extra 2 by his right-hand side as well.
It looks like he's actually got both of them in hand. It looks like he's got the 7 and the 8.
Yeah, so you could go one of 2 ways here. I think for safety, I think I am playing the 8 cost, but it looks like with the 2 Don attachment, that's not what's going to happen. So first life is elected to going to be taken, no counter, no block, and then you called it right there, Ross, there is the 7-cost blocker kid.
I don't mind this at all. Next turn you can have the 8-cost kid. But my theory here is essentially, you know what? I just need to be ahead on life. That's what I'm going for. If I win the game, brilliant, but all I really need to do is be ahead on life. He's now got 3 blockers. One has got 6,000, he's an attacker. One's got 7,000 and restands, very good attacker. And actually, you don't need the 8-cost kid at this stage. If you've got this much of a better setup than your opponent, multiple blockers, better attackers, you can actually have this and just basically do what you did at the end of last game and just get 4 or 5 attacks every single turn. Force your opponent to have the resources, and for a while Alexander might have them, but eventually he's going to run out. And it looks like we're going to see a similar thing to game 2, where Tebow overwhelms, but a different result. Because remember, Tebow didn't quite win game 2. I'm loving Tebow's chances in game 3 here.
So a 6k swing is going to come in from the Captain Kidd, which is going to be 2,000 countered pretty handily there with a Scratchman Apu. Basil Hawkins does have the option, with Don gets attached to it as well, to attack in twice. So it can swing in once, try and attack the leader and bait out one of the first blockers of 3, then elect to put it back out to active and swing once again. That would get rid of 2 blockers at maximum. Although that's not a bad response in the 7-cost kit of his own.
No, that's pretty nice, I'll be honest with you. That's a pretty nice card. Are we back to Tebow yet? Yes, we are. Now, we got the full 10 Dom. Are we going to see the 8-cost kid coming down? Not yet. We're going to see 1 on the 7-cost kid. We're going to see a swing come out. Does Alexander give up his big blocker? Does he give up his life? Or does he have at least 4,000 power counter? Is he giving up his...
He's going to waterfall it as well.
Oh, so waterfall to pick your blocker up to a 9,000 and then restand. Love that. We saw Alexander do exactly that in the last game. Lovely combo, plus 2,000, put yourself up to 9, survive the attack and restand, so you can essentially do it again. But then we see another attack actually going through and taking a life. Tebow is up by 2 here.
And now drops the 8-cost kid. Played this one to absolute perfection. You called it right there, Ross. Wanting to have that extra third big-bodied blocker on board that can happily and freely swing away and come back into active at the end of the turn to just hold down the fort and now let Eustace Captain Kidd run wild and make Alexander feel really, really uncomfortable with just over 5 on the clock.
Yeah, and I like getting the 7-cost kid first. It's a little bit scary. You do want that 8-cost kid nice and quickly, but I think having that 7-cost is a bit of a, it's both attacking threat and an offensive threat, and then bringing out the 8-cost. And here's the thing. Tebow was up by 2 life. He's now up by 1 life. He's got 4 remaining. So the question here then becomes, I don't think he's going to give up another, but then we see the other 8-cost kid, and although you're going to attack, there's no way to really rest it that Tebow's got. But crucially, if we enter a bit of a stalemate position here, Tebow's got an extra life and an extra blocker on the board, so I like Tebow's position way more.
And I also like Tebow's position going forward in terms of the resources in his deck, because remember, Ross, with one of those cards that he counted away and discarded throughout this round, he plays that starter deck X-Drake, and that starter deck X-Drake will give a nice little extra power boost to try and get over that 8-cost Captain Kidd. Not rested at the moment, so doesn't need to worry about it. Could just try and brute force his way through with 4 attacks needing to have to connect. But is that a little bit too overcompensation? I'm not 100% sure. I feel like that holding things back just for now might be the smarter play, but it certainly is an option in Tebow's deck.
Yeah, it's a nice option we've got there. So we do see the Nekomamushi coming down. Summy's coming down. It's actually a Jewelry Bonnie. So Tebow wants a card that he doesn't currently have in his hand. There's something he wants, and is it... Now it looks like he's actually high up the option card there.
Yeah, it's a Straw Sword. That's one of the starter deck event cards. I believe that is a main effect.
It just rests one of your opponent's characters. And you know how I said a minute ago you can't rest the kid?
Well, now you can rest the kid.
Yeah, Straw Sword is a card that we don't have the deck list in front of us, unfortunately.
And that's
Straw
exactly
Sword...
what Tebow does as well, just playing it down to Don to rest the Eustace Captain Kidd, and now all of a sudden it's time to really start going on the aggressive. That's now, 12,000, I believe, into the 8-cost, and
it goes down.
Alexander just has to resign himself there.
But he's got the 7,000 power blocker he could have given up instead. But I think the problem is, if you give that up, then you're probably still giving up the 8-cost anyway. And I love that. Straw Sword is not played in every green deck. When it is played, it's generally played in quite small numbers. But I love the play. Use Jewelry Bonnie just to try and find it, and it worked an absolute treat. And game 1 and 2 were pretty close. They were cagey, they were back and forth. In game 3, Tebow seems to have exactly what he wants. Getting the 7-cost kid, then the 8-cost, then countering his opponent's 8-cost. And I don't want to call the game yet, Ben, but I'm not really seeing... This seems like it's going to end up only going one way. I really think Tebow is in a real command here.
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult position for Alexander to be in. I think the reason he's not elected to block with that 7-cost Captain Kidd initially was so that on the turn afterwards he can maybe perhaps try and just trade life and swing one back and get a little bit closer if this game goes to tiebreakers. He is electing now to block and use the counter Scratchman opposed, so that will get him up to the desired 9,000 to make sure that that still stays on the field. But like you say there, it is a really, really difficult position for Alexander to have to be in, as there goes the Capone as well.
I like this. I really like this. Chooses not to attack with Trafalgar Law, keeping it as a blocker for Alexander's turn, which I think is a good call. But now we've got 4 of those 5 blockers on Tebow's side of the board. Have that blocker keyword. They can direct an attack back towards themselves, and you've got the kid there as well. And like you say, Tebow does not need to win this game. Tebow needs to be ahead on life. That's the key thing is 1-1. Whoever's ahead on life when we run out of time is going to be crowned the winner. And with 4 blockers on the board and the 8-cost kid as well, I am loving Tebow's chances here.
Although now Tebow is playing on top deck mode. Used the only card in his hand, which was that starter deck X-Drake that we alluded to earlier, to counter the first attack. Remember that Eustace Captain Kit's leader skill can restand, as can that Basil Hawkins, which is now swinging in, and there goes the 8-cost Captain Kit. So a little bit short-lived there from Tebow's side of the field, but still has that 7-cost lurking around, still has the 5-cost law blocker as well to protect himself. But all of a sudden, what was a very, very strong wide board state from Tebow is evaporated in a bit of an instant.
Yeah, so I missed the empty hand. I'll be honest with you, I was not looking at the size of his hand. We now see Killer coming down as an extra blocker for Alexander, and we see Jewelry Bonnie. We are, however, going to time in a matter of seconds, and we still do have a 2-life advantage for Tebow. Now with 10 minutes, it means you basically get your 3 extra turns, so hurry up and don't be turn 0.
Yeah, well, as it stands right now, it would be turn 0 if time expires. There's a big Captain Quid leader swing that is going to provoke a block there from the Killer, which will draw Alexander a card. Then the restand ability, I believe, has been played to get rid of the Beppo.
So it does seem like time has been called, and it looks like Tebow is going to be turn 0. He is ahead by 3 life. So, we've got to keep this going. Alexander can absolutely win in a couple of turns, you would imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to try and get around these blockers. He would want one of those straw swords actually right about now, just to be able to rest down those blockers and just continue to try and poke forward and poke through. He's got 3, possibly 4, 5 options if he uses both of the possible restand abilities. I believe we are now in turn 1, because I think time expired just as Tebow was finishing up his turn. We'll get a little bit of confirmation if that's possible, but I believe Alexander is in turn 0. So Alexander is in turn 0 now. Tebow's turn managed to complete after time expired, or before time expired.
Before time expired.
And we'll see if Alexander can salvage this one and bring himself into top 4.
So Alexander has this turn and 1 more. Tebow has 2 turns after this. And the question is going to be, can Tebow hold on? Or even maybe win the game? And Alexander has got to go full aggression. It's awkward. You want to take out those blockers to give yourself an easier route. What you really want to do is go around the blockers. But like we said, Green have a load of options for resting, but not great options. Akiku could rest at Trafalgar Law, being a 5-cost. Unfortunately, there's no Akiku on the field, so that's kind of a moot point. We have Izo, who is an on-play skill, but that's a 4-cost or less, so that's not going to go and get the Trafalgar Law. So now the problem becomes, essentially for Alexander, how do you take life, and you've got to take life, around those 2 big blockers? And this is, we saw again, like we saw from Tebow, just like Alexander, chose to give up the 8-cost kit to keep the 7-cost kit. This is why.
Yeah, it's a really interesting strategy that's been coming out here. Just saw off the Jewelry Bonnie search, electing to grab a Killer, despite there being an Okiku in that top 5 that Alexander saw. But of course, it's not got the keyword Rash on it, so it can't be starting to use its when attacking ability to rest down that Trafalgar Law, electing instead just to grab one of the blockers, probably consolidate himself. He is in a little bit of danger when it comes to the life count, however. 1 life did get taken, it has been taken so far on Alexander's turn. There goes another one, so the gap becomes a little bit slimmer, but he is still running slightly behind the 8 ball.
He is, and one thing that you've got to remember is you're not guaranteed those extra 3 turns. If time runs out, time runs out. I can see a bit of a reason to grab the Okiku, because although you can't play it this turn, in theory, you've got one more turn.
Yeah.
And it could be relevant on that turn. But the problem is, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, whereas Killer is just going to give you a blocker, so I see the reason why you would take it, but there was a reason to take the Akiku, not for this turn, but for next turn. Assuming you got the Dom to play it, of course.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll see how is Alexander going to try and conclude this turn. This is still turn 0 of the 3 turns, but the 10-minute timer is expiring at the top of your screen, as you see there. He's going to elect to use the restand ability. Got rid of an 8-cost kit of his own there, it looks like, in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Yeah, I can see it in the discount pile there from Alexander. That swing will be countered. And now back to Alexander. Is he going to drop that blocker, those blockers that he managed to find off of the jewellery Bonnie? Is he just going to try and hold it firm and go for the big furious swing? There is the Trafalgar Law blocker. So that's going to help things out with that 6,000 power. Now has to try and think about what he's going to play off of that. It is going to be the Capone, get that one there for free, restand the Captain Kid, and goes over to you, Tebow. What do you got?
I love the defensiveness here. I love having those 3 blockers on board. That's really good. Alexander clearly trying not to give up any more life. That's not enough. You need to take minimum 1 life. And I don't know, but if I had to guess, I'm sure that Alexander has used a lot more searching skills here than Tebow. I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would think that Alexander would have fewer cards left in deck. So if we do go to a tie where we've got the same number of life having been taken, I think Tebow would win. Let's be 100% clear. I am not 100% sure, but I'm sure we see more of those searching, and we've seen Killer drawing a few cards as well. So if I'm Alexander, I'm thinking I've got to get rid of that life. Tebow here, I think if Tebow can somehow take a life, it is going to go a long way to shoring up this game. The problem is you're facing down 3 blockers. How do you take a life?
Yeah, and when you're countering like that as well, in combination with those blockers, it is very, very difficult to just try and allow one to poke through. There is 9 Dons still up and available for Tebow, depending on how he wants to assign these resources. Does have, I think it's like 2 or 3 cards in hand as well. Here comes a 7,000 swing.
And you're going to restand this afterwards. So you're going to swing with a 7,000, and then you're going to restand it to do another 7,000 swing. So with that, and I mean, do you want to swing with the law? But if you swing with the law, then you're leaving a blocker that can't really be used, but you're not getting an attack through if you don't, because there's still 2 blockers on the field. That will help.
That will help, and that will give him a little bit of an extra decision. It still elects not to swing in with the law, and I don't mind that idea. I don't mind continuing to hold that law back, stopping off obviously the Basil. There's still that Basil Hawkins there on the left side of Alexander's play area as well, so that can swing in and restand and swing with a Don underneath it. The leader skill of Captain Kidd also being able to restand as long as a card gets discarded. But then when you switch it back over to the turn 3 and Tebow's final turn, discarding that means there's 1 less counter in your hand to try and stave off and help that life. Or conversely, if you just swing in and can't take a life, then Tebow just goes draw, pass, I win.
Yeah, that is the problem. I mean, this is it, right? Alexander has to take a life this turn and then kind of hope that the cards in deck swings in his favour. If he can take 2 life this turn, then, I mean, it's still not over, because remember, Tebow has 1 more turn, in assuming we've got enough time to do so. This is turn number 2. Alexander was turn 0. Tebow was turn 1. This is turn 2. So we do have 1 more after this. It is 3 turns or 10 minutes, whichever expires first. So are we going to be attacking in? Do we... I mean, if you're Tebow here, you've got to block. You have to block.
Yeah, I was worried for a little bit there. He was just hovering over his life counter.
Yeah,
his
that's
life
what I saw.
there. It was very, very tentative. Now a life is going to be taken, however, and he has looked at his life. So that means that he's going to commit. Punk Gibson is a big, big rest.
And it does rest any character. He's gone for the blocker there, which is quite nice, and that means you can probably... And here's the thing, there's going to be 1 active blocker on Alexander's side of the board. And that's the thing, as much as that seemed awkward, Tebow does get the last turn here. And I believe that Tebow is ahead on cards in deck, although I have not counted. I'm just going by what I've seen in the game. I think Alexander's taken more cards out of deck. We do see an attack here with the leader. That gets blocked. Presumably, we're going to see the leader restand here.
Yeah, Freedon still holding open. Now just counting him up, putting him sideways. I imagine that there's the motion, the little tap on the front of the super pre-release arm.
And there we
swinging
go.
it in. That will clear the final blocker.
So now Alexander, there's another blocker killer there. So it's over to Tebow. We're tied 1 life each. We're tied 1 game each. Tebow can attack twice with his leader. There's 2 blockers on the board, 2 active blockers on the board.
Yeah.
I don't see any way Tebow's getting an attack through here.
No, there's no rush to speak of in green, realistically.
Yeah, green doesn't do rush.
So this is more than likely going to go down to cards in deck. But then the question becomes actually that with cards in deck being a tiebreaker, what happens if we see, like we did in top 16, if cards in deck are level, Alexander will win on characters on board.
I mean, I think 4-0 is pretty constructive, honestly. We're going to get this awkward situation where we got this really exciting back and forth top 8 game. You and I have been sitting here for an hour and 10 minutes watching, and then we're going to be like, and now we wait while the judges count the number of cards in deck. And I understand why that's the tiebreaker. It's because essentially the more cards you've got left in deck, the less you've done, the more efficient your deck has been, etc. But yeah, we see the decks being picked up by the judges. We've run out of our free turns. We are tied on life. For what it's worth, I think if we have enough extra turns, I think Alexander's got this.
Yeah, I think in this game state, in the situation that he was in, Alexander would have been in the driver's seat. You can see the exacerbation there. It's taken a lot out of both of these players to get to where they are, play 2 decks that are very, very intensive on the mind and being able to make sure that you've got all your pieces where they need to be. And this will be a heartbreaking way for Tebow's journey or Alexander's journey in this Treasure Cup to come to an end. We will get official confirmation very, very soon.
We can see Carl there. Hi, Carl. Carl's the guy who runs the stream. Carl is brilliant. He's done such a phenomenal job on the stream. We are big Carl fans. Carl is coming down to check because, look, this is top 8 of a Treasure Cup. We're trying to decide who goes to top 4. We need to double check the count, okay? This is really important. All I ask, and annoyingly Carl's usually listening, is clearly not now, I hope they make it clear who wins.
Yeah.
I hope they make it really clear who wins this game. Can we have some jumping up and down? Can we have some shouting? Can we have some arms flailing in the air? Oh, and it looks like Tebow has won the game. We don't need to double check that. Tebow does win, and I thought that was going to be the case because we saw Tebow using fewer searching cards, wasn't using that killer. I'd love to know how close it is. I'm clearly going to ask Carl when this game's over. That was about as close as any card game could possibly be. 1 game each, both those games are very close.
Yeah.
Game 3 comes down to 1 life each remaining, cards in deck, and Tebow wins, and it's little things like all of those searches, and it just...
One card.
One card. Carl's just popped round and told us. 28 to 29, Tebow had exactly 1 card more in deck. And here's the thing, if Tebow had drawn 1 more card, we would have gone to the 3rd tiebreaker and Alexander would have won definitively. Yeah. Tebow drawing 1 fewer card, that is what ended up deciding this game. When I say this is as close as it could possibly be, this is as close as it could possibly be. That was a ridiculous top 8 game.
Oh man, and both players as well played their absolute socks off. Tebow just there to the right hand side. Do you want to come and have a chat, Tebow?
Yeah, Tebow's going to come and have a chat. I'm going to pop off, and lovely Ben is going to have a chat with Tebow. That was good. Well done, man.
Well done, mate.
Thank you.
Ben, fly over.
Here you go. Take a seat, Tebow, mate.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you've just walked your way into top 4 of the first One-Piece Treasure Cup in the UK, and it's come down to cards in deck. We saw your reaction there on the screen. How are you feeling, mate?
I'm feeling amazing. I was hoping for Ben Gibson. I played 2 in my deck, and I didn't see them all the game. So I was thinking it's a small possibility, or I'll do something else to rest this killer to go for life, because it's down to life.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was my turn, because no, it's 1, 2, 3, but doesn't matter. And I said, oh, I have another turn. I'll hopefully Ben Gibson. And I said, oh my God, rested, and that was like the most amazing feeling ever. Like, it's only happened once, and the whole time I'm playing, but now it was game changing. I'm now top 4. I think I'm the only Belgium player here.
Wow.
I think so. I don't know for sure, but I'm proud to represent my country.
Well, that's absolutely incredible if you are the only Belgian player. What a way to fly the flag for your nation. We saw in that deck, obviously in the mirror match, an 8-cost kid is such a massive card. And your deck plays something quite unique to help try and get around that. Could you explain putting in that 4-cost starter deck extra?
Because when a Don is attached with Interested, it's already a 7k, so if I can put behind 8-cost kids, it can, with one Dawn I can swing with 10k already, so I'll need less Dawn to help kill his characters. It's also amazing against blue because it's 7k, and if I'm behind an 8-cost kit when it's down to the wire, I can just swing one Dawn, 10, one Dawn to my 7-cost kit, 9. I can keep swinging with low amount of effort and still keep my Dawn open to play some other cards.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's a hidden tech, but it's amazing. I only played it once this tournament because I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to play it very slowly. I had the perfect curve in game 1 with 7 drop kit and 10 another one, and I could keep going, and the Pancakes of Life really finished it off. I expected I would hit top 64, but I didn't expect me to hit like top 4. Like, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, now that you're here for top 4, you got to try and go all the way. You played it absolutely tremendously, even with, you said about there discarding away some resources.
Yeah.
We saw you discard away the 8-cost kit a couple of times. What was the thinking behind that?
I didn't feel like I had the time to play it, and I needed to pressure him more. If 8-cost kit is really fine, but if I cannot pressure him, I cannot win. Like, if he doesn't have counters in hand, which is very possible, like the kid deck plays a lot of non-counter cards in his deck. If I can squeeze out 1 or 2 lives, when he's down to 0 life, I can maybe try to make my 8-cost kits, make my 7-cost kits swing for life, or keep dwindling down his resources. And once he cannot block, I can just swing for game, and then he needs to use his 7-cost kit or other cards that he tried to keep.
Well, Thibaut, you played absolutely fantastically there. You've spoken eloquently as well.
Thank you.
You're into top 4. We hope to see you back on stream later on in the grand final.
Thank you, man.
Congratulations, my
Thank you.
friend. Now, don't go anywhere, because it sounds like as well that we are actually going to be able to speak to the one who fell, unfortunately, in that game, Mr. Alexander, and Ross, I believe, is going to be the one to take on that interview. So we will switch things over right here.
And we will join in. That was a professional change if ever I've seen one. Alexander, that was a phenomenal game. Congratulations for making top 8. That was awesome to watch. Now, you did request to come in. We don't always grab the people after a defeat because, it's an awkward time. But you should be so proud of yourself. 500 players, you're in the 8 best.
Yeah, it feels good to be in the top 8. I faced really good players, had a really great time. I think I played reasonably well in this game. But
I'd say so.
yeah, I had not really a misplay, a little lapse when I attacked with the leader. I thought I was attaching the Don to Okiku to rest the law, so my bad there. So I took it, and that completely changed the game. I spent a turn without making anything, almost took it back, but then he had the trigger with the Punkits.
Yeah, that was a big.
I could have gone for his last life, and then losing for 1 card in the deck.
I know. I mean, I've seen a lot of card games, in a lot of different games, a lot of matches. I've been doing this a long time. I have never seen a game that close. 1 game each, and both the games were really close. Both could have gone either way. We then get to game 3, 1 life remaining each. How much did you know the tiebreakers? Were you aware of how important it was to have the life? Were you thinking about cards in deck?
Yeah, I was thinking about the life. I was trying to get his last life. If I hadn't had the law rested by the trigger, I would have gone with the law to attack as well, and then just put the killer. And when I blocked with the killer, I didn't draw, so 1 more card in the deck, but still 1 card off. So.
That is just a little bit of a pain. So you deliberately didn't draw on the killer for that reason. And I love that we saw a game yesterday on stream where a player had a chance to take a life and instead took out some characters and then lost on that tiebreaker. So it's lovely to see kind of you being aware of that and doing that. I've got to ask, you played the Shachi Penguin combination?
Just the Chachi.
Oh, just the Shachi. Why is that?
3k blocker.
Okay.
and 1k counter. Sometimes you don't want to counter with other stuff, So another blocker that you can call on with the 8-Don Kid. And it's a very versatile card. Loses a bit on the consistency since he's not a supernova or Wano country.
Yeah.
But he's very flexible. Sometimes you just need some more blockers to protect the kid and your life. So I'm very pleased with Chachi's performance, but no penguins.
Oh, that's a bit of a shame. I love the Shachi Penguin combo personally. So last question then, like, we're coming into this format. Everybody thought Green was one of the decks to beat. Everybody thought it was going to be one of the top decks.
Yeah.
Why did you pick it, and were you worried there were going to be too many mirror matches?
Not worried too much. I expected as many mirror matches. Actually, I expected more. I think I only played about 3 or 4 mirror matches.
That's enough.
Yeah. But people have been saying I've played like against 5 or 6 kids.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I played the kid. I also liked Law very much, but I just didn't have much luck playing Law. So okay, I'm gonna.
So you played both the
with
decks. So it's basically testing. You play with both of them, and it's you win more with Captain Kid essentially. That's your.
Yeah, overall I think I had more consistency with Kid. In a tournament like this, 500 players, 500 great players I've encountered so far. So congratulations to all of them. I'm really lucky to be here, especially talking to you. I heard your voice over there, and I was like, oh man, I gotta meet him. So big fan.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So it's really a pleasure being here talking to you, even if not in the best circumstances for me.
I mean, yeah, but I can't stress enough, seriously, top 8 in a tournament of this size. And, you know, I've seen plenty of games, top cut games in various matches, all different games, where players just get rolled. And it happens. Sometimes you lose. You could have won game 1. You did win game 2, but that was again extremely close. That could have gone either way. And then I have honestly never seen a game as close as that third game. And you know, when Carl came over to count, I was like, oh, it must be quite close. To lose by a single card in deck. And again, I think it's a testament to you as a player. The fact you chose not to draw off of the killer block. Little things like that. That's the difference in so many games. And it didn't go your way today, but I think you played brilliantly. Congratulations. That was absolutely awesome. And the good news is, also for a second, we need to do the outro. And the good news is we've got a top 4 game. It's not going to be very far, so grab a nice cold beverage, don't go far. We'll be back very soon. Wave goodbye.
See ya. Good luck, people.
Is Carl there? Have we cut? Is this going to be like an outtake?
Yeah. So.